We wake up today, ladies and gentlemen of the podcast. I'm Dr. Matthew Crossan, to the horrible news from the Ariana Grande concert in Manchester, England. And it reminded me, unfortunately, of a piece I wrote just a little over a year ago, in March of 2016, which was in fact inspired by the horrible tragedies that had taken place in Paris and in Brussels. It was called The Tyranny of the 1%, The Illusion of Overcoming Terror. I find it even more appropriate today that while overall we are all justifiably upset and saddened and depressed and angry and outraged, if we can find a silver lining, sometimes it's important to remember the silver lining in these dark clouds. And I think this piece shows exactly what that silver lining can and must be, even if delivered with the negativity and the depression that we all feel when innocent people lose their lives. So we'll continue with the podcast today, talking about that article. It started with a quote from Dwight D. Eisenhower: "If you want total security, go to prison. The only thing lacking is freedom." And now we have Manchester to add to a list that seemingly can never grow shorter, only longer. There are many names on this list, many cities, many countries. In some minds, the list has grown faster and deeper since the global community's major powers formally declared war against such extremism and the killing of innocents. To many, that probably seems bitterly ironic and heinously inappropriate. As leaders today all over the world line up to express their horror and offer their sincere condolences to the people of Britain, there is one sentiment repeatedly expressed: we must all truly unite to fight off such old-world barbarism. While I understand the sentiment and the angry frustration residing deep inside it, I fear it is also an impossible dream for a reason we do not openly discuss and do not openly understand why we should value that fact. Namely, there can be no perfect security where there is already a near-perfect freedom. It is not a tension. It is not a problem of imperfect policy. It is not the failure of executing proper terrorist countermeasures. It is an axiom. If we are to be free as a society, then we can never be idyllically safe as well, not to 100% at least. The two interests are in contrast to one another, and that, much more than suffering from terrorism while the world declares war against it, is the profoundly bitter irony we must all adjust to, for as with all axioms, it shall never be reversed. Now, this is not a standard exposition on quaint platitudes that we can often read and will no doubt read again in the immediate aftermath of Manchester, about how freedom isn't free, or how the person willing to give up liberty for security is deserving of neither. This is not a criticism of people in the modern day as much as a confession as to what democratic freedom truly means in a society. Freedom of movement, freedom of association, freedom to travel, freedom of belief, freedom of information, freedom from unlawful search and seizure, freedom from unjust prosecution. These things we hold to be so basic, so fundamentally rooted in the essence of our free societies, that we forget such precious things also come with severe consequences in the realm of security. The most important of which is the general mystery and secrecy with which we can all live our lives. Even now, today, in our hyper-technological 21st century, where most of us are either online or recently were online, our every movement, location, and thought, potentially transmitted openly, voluntarily, revealed to friend and stranger alike, it is remarkable how easy it is that we forget that it's not that difficult to not be noticed at all. There's an old Russian proverb I love to remind people of. If you only knew how little people think of you, then you wouldn't worry so much about what people think. It's a humbling reminder of how fantastically small we all are in a giant world of billions. No matter how big, how famous, or how well known in our individual spheres of influence we become, the reality is for most of us that 99% of the world does not know us, or quite frankly, care to know us. Why does this matter, and how does it pertain to what happened last night in Manchester? Quite simply, it explains why a free society can never achieve perfect security. It's exactly because of its freedom, and how people can so easily remain disconnected from each other's attention. Now, many people do not know that several of the terrorists who perpetrated 9/11 in the United States back in 2001 learned how to fly jumbo jets on simulators in various private flight schools in small-town America. Fewer still realize that these men with foreign-sounding names and middling English language skills were adamant in insisting to their instructors that they be taught how to take off and fly, but showed no interest whatsoever in learning how to land. One astute American instructor even went so far, given the unique weirdness of that situation, to call into his local FBI office and report it. Unfortunately, the unique weirdness was so unique and so weird and so out of the ordinary that the local agent was unable to consider it anything except the random oddity one sometimes finds in a truly free land. This is America, after all, where anyone can pretty much do whatever they want, no matter how weird it is. And thus, it went uninvestigated, and several unique and weird men were allowed to acquire a few odd aviation skills that would literally go on to change the entire geopolitical security landscape of the 21st century. The point of this little anecdote is to show you how hard it is to be noticed in a free society, even when you are doing things that should in all rights be noticed quite readily. Now just imagine when you are actually trying to not be noticed, that you suddenly undertake multiple strategies to be unseen and unheard, both physically and digitally. In a free society, it is remarkably and scarily easy to do. And that horrific but righteous combination, to be free and unnoticed, is what makes Manchester happen, and Brussels happen, and San Bernardino, and Paris, and Nigeria, and Kenya, and Madrid, and London, and Moscow, and New York, and countless other cities and countries most of us don't even know because we are too busy being free to bother noticing. Remember that I said perfect security. For if there is indeed any silver lining in this black cloud of morning after analysis, it is that for every Manchester, for every Brussels and Paris and New York, there are 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 avoided Brussels and Parises and New Yorks and Manchesters. Some of them we hear of, but most of them we don't. But even if we did, I doubt it would give much relief to those caught up in the wake of the terror of that successful 1%. For that is the truly heinous nature of terrorism in the modern age. Our technology and policing and intelligence capabilities are so advanced and so keen that we truly do succeed in stopping 99% of possible incidents, preventing those who wish to do us harm simply because our societies are unjustly judged evil and unholy and perverted. But the intensity and shocking insecurity of that remaining minuscule percentage forces us to try to make grand statements about grand strategies, to call upon global unified collaborations to sweep up and drive out that final 1%. But that, alas, dear podcasters, is the saddest news of all. The 1% can never be swept up. It will never be swept up. This is not because of the brilliance of the planners or the cunning of the executors. The minuscule 1% succeeds because we live in free societies and we are indeed free people. Any society that gets close to being perfectly free can never ever hope to also be perfectly secure. That irony may be bitter, but it is also truly indeed glorious. And I hope we can always remember that in the aftermath of such tragedies like Manchester. My thoughts and prayers go out to all the victims. I'm sorry for their loss. I'm sorry for the injustice. But I hope we can indeed try to remember that 1% shouldn't force us to forget the 99% that we succeed in stopping.